Hello everybody, I'm Tessie. I'm here with the APL Readers Corner and Stacy is joining me this week. Those of you that haven't been tuning in every Friday at 1, this is the APL Readers Corner, and so every week we are reviewing a book from a different genre. And we read the book and then we're here live just to kind of talk about it. We talk about the genre, we see if anybody who's watching likes the book, hates the book, if they read along with us. All these books are available on Hoopla, so if you go to Aurora Public Library on our website, you can go to our Hoopla app, and with your library card you can check out the book right away. So if you listen to us and you really want to read the book afterwards, you can go and read it, just get on the internet and grab it. And the books that we're choosing are kind of staff preference, so I chose this book, to Stacy's dismay. But yeah. And so this week the genre that we were choosing the book from were classics. So classic, for the most part, a lot of people, when you think classic, you think, oh, these are the books that they made us read in school. But to become a classic, a book basically has to be excellent for the time period that it was written in. And a lot of readers have to agree that it is a work of astounding quality, that it was really good. A lot of people read it and basically a lot of people liked it. So even if nowadays people read Wuthering Heights and they hate it, back in the day a lot of people read it. Although with this particular book, I'll say that it got some bad reviews when it first came out. A lot of people thought it was very coarse, that it was a little bit too much for the time period, but it was kind of Victorian era, so that kind of makes sense. But overall it has an enduring quality. Some other things that I find really interesting about classics are that they basically start a trend. So it's like someone writes a book that is really well loved and it's really well regarded, and then a lot of people kind of mirror that book, either the writing style or kind of the direction that they take the book, if they start a whole new literary genre. So I think Wuthering Heights did a good amount of that. Stacy's going to be talking about that later. She kind of delved into the English major side of things with Wuthering Heights, so that is what makes it classic, that it's very good, that a lot of people read it, a lot of people can basically, a lot of people read it and they like it, and it can be understood by a wide group of people. So getting back to the book, so Wuthering Heights, the Penguin Random House summary of it, which I'm going to just read out loud because I thought it was really interesting. I have a few comments about it, but from Penguin Random House, they say perhaps the most haunting and tormented love story ever written, Wuthering Heights is the tale of the troubled orphan Heathcliff and his doomed love for Catherine Earnshaw. First of all, I don't agree that it's the most haunting and tormented love story ever, but we'll get to that. It was published in 1847, the year before Emily Bronte's death at the age of 30. So she wrote the book, it was published, and then she died a year later, which is unfortunate. Wuthering Heights has proved to be one of the 19th century's most popular, yes, disturbing masterpieces. The windswept moors are the unforgettable setting of this tale of the love between the foundling Heathcliff and his wealthy benefactor's daughter, Catherine. Though Catherine's betrayal of Heathcliff and his bitter vengeance, their mythic passion haunts the next generation even after their deaths, incorporating elements of many genres, from gothic novels and ghost stories to poetic allegory. Wuthering Heights transcends them all. So I think that's a pretty good summary of the book in general.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. It's a little bit simplistic because when you read this you sort of think that it's a love story, but when I read it I feel like it's just a tale of passion rather than love, and it's a tale of a lot of bitterness and a lot of revenge. And so that's what I get out of it, and that's what I like. But so when people call it a love story, I'm like, maybe, maybe not. The author, Emily Brontë, is really interesting. So a lot of people read her books and her sister's books. They are basically a trio. So it was Emily Brontë, it was Charlotte Brontë, and Anne Brontë. I've read books from all three sisters, and they have slightly different writing styles, but I enjoyed them all. I've read the most of Charlotte Brontë, like I've read Jane Eyre, I've read The Professor, I've read some of her other stuff, and I really liked them all. Though I think out of all of them, I might like Wuthering Heights the best. But they've all written classic literature, and all of their books have become classic literature, and I feel like that's a very interesting point, that three sisters from one family have written books that have withstood this, like, withstood time, which is really interesting. Emily Brontë was also a poet, so if you like Wuthering Heights, you can check out her poems. I think they're really great. She, like, from her book and from her poems, you can tell that she had a very strong personality. Which maybe didn't quite fit in the time period that she was writing in, but it makes for good work that a lot of people can read and understand and relate to. Let's see. And a little bit more about Emily Brontë, like her family situation. She grew up sort of like in an isolated moor setting. She was the fifth of six children. And her mother died pretty early in her life, and so some of the biographers of the Brontë sisters attribute the fact that their mother died early so that they didn't really have a woman figure, and their dad was a pastor, and so he was kind of doing his own thing. Like he made sure that they had an education, which is why that they could write so well. But other than that, they were kind of left to their own devices, so they were able to go out, they could create their own fantasy worlds, they weren't restricted by the society of the time, which a lot of people say helped with their imagination, but they were also really kind of poor. And so once they kind of passed their childhood, they realized that, oh, we need to get jobs. So like Emily Brontë, Charlotte Brontë, and like Anne Brontë, they went out and got jobs as teachers, as governesses, and so you can see that that was put into their work, and they have a lot of commentary about that, but from a perspective that they didn't approve of the system. So I think that made it really interesting. Let's see, and then all of the books that they wrote when they were first published, especially Wuthering Heights, they were written under a pseudonym. So they pretended to be male authors, and then they published their books. And then after a while, like Charlotte Brontë, I know for sure, like revealed that like this was her book, that she was a writer, and she went out into society and like sold her book that way. Emily, I think, died before she had the chance. She died of tuberculosis right after Wuthering Heights was published. So that's just a little bit of background about them. They're super interesting as authors, and as a family, and kind of as like their writing style. So if you're like Wuthering Heights, I would recommend looking more into them. There's a lot of biographies about them as well. And despite the amount of people who might have read this book during high school and were forced, and like I feel like when you're forced to read a book, you don't like it as much. But on social media, on Amazon, Goodreads, Hoopla, this book, if you've never read it before, usually has a 4 out of 5 or above. So a lot of people do like this book. Not Stacy, but I do. Yeah. Cool. And so we'll get started, kind of the book discussion. So if anybody has any comments, feel free to write them below. We'll answer the questions as they come. But we'll kind of start in general. So I'll explain for one why I like the book, and then we'll let Stacy take over with why she disliked the book, and then maybe go over a couple questions if we have time. But in general, I want to say that with Wuthering Heights, I was not forced to read this book in school, and so I picked it up and I read it just on my own when I was younger. And I really, like, even then I don't think I viewed it as a love story, but I've read it and I really like kind of the class structures in the book. So I really enjoyed the fact that Catherine, so the main Catherine, not her daughter, is a very headstrong, she's very independent person, and she has a really strong personality, which I really enjoyed. She is in love with Heathcliff, but then she realizes that she doesn't want to be poor for the rest of her life, and so then she goes and she gets with Edward. It's Edward, right?
Edgar.
Edgar. Yeah. So
Look at my family tree as Edgar.
yes, we had to, after reading this book again, we decided to make a family tree just so we could keep all the characters straight, because there's two Catherines.
Money.
Yeah. But so it's Edgar. So eventually she decides to marry Edgar, not so much because she loves him. Like, I think when you read the book, she doesn't mind him. Like, she likes him, she's okay with him, but it's not that passionate, like all the passion or all the feelings that she has for Heathcliff. But I never saw it as a bad thing that she decided to go for a life of comfort rather than staying with Heathcliff. Not that she would know that he would come back rich from wherever he got his money from in the middle of the book, but the fact that she was able to make that choice and was able to choose, I really like that. I really love her character. So not everybody likes her character, but I love her a lot. I also like the setting of the book, the windswept moors, like it's like classic British kind of setting that I enjoy. And then I also enjoy Heathcliff's, basically his path of bitterness and revenge. Like, I don't think he's a good person, but I understand why he does the things he does. So, that's my take on it. I like the book. What do you think, Stacey?
I mean, you make points that, like, I, like, sort of agree with, but we feel differently about them. So, like, I told you, my big thing about this book was that I don't like it. I don't like the characters. I don't really like the story. But from, like, a literature standpoint, it's this really interesting era where they're just leaving the Romantic period into the Victorian period while also still being in the Gothic period, and everything overlaps a lot. So when you're talking about social class, like, Catherine choosing to marry Edgar over her love Heathcliff is, like, crazy. Because she's only marrying for her social status. Which I guess you take as a comfort, and I took as a Brontë commenting on the issue of social class. Because, sorry, my thoughts are kind of everywhere. I take it less as a, like, comfort thing and more as a commentary on the social class because of how social class is the motive for everyone's revenge in it. Like, Heathcliff in particular was an orphan. He got adopted into this wealthy family.
He was lucky.
Yeah, Heathcliff. And then he was, what's his name? Is it Hindley?
Yeah, Hindley. Hindley hated him.
Becomes the owner and then makes him a laborer again. So then he's like, he's like worth nothing. And then all of a sudden he comes back with all this mysterious money and wealth. And like uses that as a motive to like take over and the manor and like abuse everybody. And so I guess to me it wasn't Brontë saying that Catherine like chose for comfort, but it's a social class creates all this negativity, it creates selfishness, it creates revenge, and so.
Yeah, and that's like the beauty of a classic is that depending on who's reading it and the time period that it's coming from, it's reinterpreted, but at the same time people can still relate to it. So it's like maybe like from the point of view of that time period, social class being such a restrictive, like that commentary about social class being bad would have been like a new and exciting thing, but I feel like people reading it nowadays will like take the aspects of the social class and be like, oh yeah, like parts of social class and classism is like sucks basically. So it's like those dual things. Like, you can read a book back then, and, like, people would have thoughts about it, and then if you read the book now, you have, like, different thoughts. But it's still a really good book, or at least I think so.
I mean, I can definitely, while I don't like it, I appreciate what makes it a classic.
Yeah. Yeah. And you also brought up a really good point, which is, where did Heathcliff get his money? Like, they don't bring it up in the book. I've never actually thought about it, but if anybody watching right now has any theories on where he got his money from, feel free to put it in the comments. I don't know if you have a theory, Stacey. Like, I know it was a plot device, but still.
Really mean man.
Swindled it out of somebody.
I don't really want to know how he got it.
And I think a lot of people that read the book judge him. But he is a horrible man. Like, I wouldn't be like, put him as a romantic figure of any sort. But I find him understandable.
Yeah, I think the word understandable.
Yeah.
I understand why he does what he does.
Yeah.
But is it justified? No.
No. I think the character that I hated the most, I want to say, was his son? Linton?
Yes.
Okay. I was like, did I get this right? Yeah.
So many names.
He was a character that I hated the most. Like, I felt like he was very, like, he was a product of how he was raised. And I think when he's living with Heathcliff, he gets worse. Because he's just in a situation that's not nice for anybody to be in. And Heathcliff's abusive, and manipulative, like, but I feel like the way he responds to it means that I don't like him as a person. So he was a character I hated the most. So I don't know if you have a character that you hated the most, Stacey, or if anybody else has a character that they hate the most from Wuthering Heights.
I mean, for me, probably Heathcliff.
Heathcliff?
I think because this book is promoted as a love story.
Yeah.
And, like, Heathcliff just isn't a likable guy. He's not someone I want Catherine or anybody to be with. So
I think him and Catherine had a vibe, because she's not the best person either, even though I really like her character. But she's not the best person, so I feel like if they had just been together, they could have maybe mitigated it, or at least they'd be happy together and make everybody else around them miserable. But even though I liked her character, I feel like they were just both miserable, bad people.
No, I'm with you. I appreciate the feminist icon that Catherine is.
Yeah.
Because I actually, when we started reading this, I went through some of my old school papers that I wrote on this, and I pretty much just focused on Catherine as a feminist. And then I was disappointed that she married for money, but I understood because of the time.
Yeah, but I feel like because of the time period, being able to choose to marry for money is kind of feminist, but which is one reason I liked her. I feel like she wasn't forced into it, but that it was her own choice, and that she was trying to make it work as well as she could, while the forces around her, the society around her, was trying to say, oh no, you can't love two people at once. No, you can't be in a comfortable home and still like somebody else, even though, I mean, that's not something that we approve of nowadays either, but cool. Alright, so I don't know if you have any last thoughts about this book, Stacey, that you want to share.
I have so many thoughts I want to share. I think my last thought is just that you mentioned earlier that you like the setting, and then we started talking about society, and I think the setting of this book is really interesting. I didn't realize that Brontë, like, lived in the moors, but,
yeah, they live pretty isolated, which is a reflection, I think, in a lot of their books.
I haven't read any of the other books, so I've only read Wuthering Heights.
I have a book list for you.
Like,
I have a book list.
It starts pretty much like within the first few pages. It's like we live in the moors, and the moors are isolated. They're harsh. They're wet. Like nothing can grow here. It's really swampy. And then like being so isolated from society, but then still choosing society over love was really interesting to me.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting.
Because, like, I drew so many pictures. There's, like, the moor, and then there's the two manors inside.
Mm-hmm.
And then the two manors are, like, the Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange.
Yeah.
But, like, they kind of just had their own society. They didn't have to, like, do things the way that they did. They could have made the society of their isolated society the one that they wanted, and they still chose to, like, do all this revenge. And
Well, I think that because they were isolated is the reason that they could go so far. Because if they had been, like, in the middle of London, like, there would have been people around them that were like, Heathcliff, you're an awful person, like, don't do this. Or there would have been more support structures for some of the characters, like, young Catherine could have ran away to some other place to just get away from that negative environment, but... So I feel like the isolation played up that revenge.
Isabel leave.
Yeah, she did.
And then she has the kid, Linton. And then she dies, and Linton ends up coming back. Like, they can't escape the isolation. They are always brought back. Or they die. Or they die in isolation.
Yeah.
It's not a cheery book.
No. It's not a cheery thought for the times either. No. But yeah. So, on that note, on that rather dreary note, thank you guys all for joining us today. If you read the book along with us, I hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't, I'm sorry that I made you read this book. I'm sorry I made Stacy read the book because she doesn't like it. But I recommend, if you do like the book, that you read some of her sister's work. So if you like Wuthering Heights, I would say check out Jane Eyre, check out The Professor. There's A Tenant of Wildfield Hall by their sister Anne, and that one is lauded as one of the first feminist books, even more so than Wuthering Heights. So that's also a really good option. And so those are definitely good books. They're on my book list. Like, I read them every so often. Sort of like some people read Pride and Prejudice. I read Wuthering Heights. I read Jane Eyre, Agnes Grey, that sort of thing. But thank you all for joining us, and check out our other virtual programming that we have here at the Aurora Public Library. We do story times almost every day at 10 a.m., so check those out. They're a lot of fun. And then next week for the APL Readers Corner, we're going to be here for a romantic comedy, and the book is called Truth or Beard by Penny Reed, and so that one's going to be a lot of fun. So I hope you guys all have a great day, and you stay safe. Bye.